Hello guys and welcome to another episode of Young with Ram. You know, the series where I answer the questions you posted in the comment section of the previous Young with Ram. First of all, I have to explain myself. In the last Young with Ram, I said that I was going to hold another subscriber event this last Friday, but this is probably the reason why I am so reluctant to hold these kind of events. Because when Friday came, I simply couldn't. I simply couldn't attend. So apologize go for all of those of you who were waiting for the room to appear. I wasn't home. Real life messed me up, and I simply couldn't make it in time. I actually was back home by 11 p.m. more or less, and the event was scheduled to be at 7 p.m. So, and that's kind of the problem with these things. My life is a little bit crazy right now. So there are things that are popping up now and then, and I have to attend, and I have to maybe go to Madrid and do stuff, and I'm not always going to be able to do that. I should have posted something, and I actually did in Facebook, but it was kind of a surprise that I had to go to Madrid. So I'm sorry for that. I will try to hold another one this Friday, but I'm not promising anything. I will keep you guys updated. I probably will make the announcement through Facebook. So if you are not yet in Facebook, well, join me there. The link is down in the description. As for the rest of things, you will have seen that this last week there was just one video, and that was the Fighter Combat School about engine management, and that was again because last week was a little bit hectic on my side, and I couldn't really do a lot of stuff. Um, Hopefully, I will be able to again upload maybe once a day or once each 2 days, hopefully. But yeah, well, let's say that right now I'm moving a lot and I don't have enough time to make a lot of videos. Anyway, back to the questions, and the first one is Ram. What's your favorite fighter squadron and why? Well, I would say that is in GJ54, the fighter squadron of Focke-Wulf 90s in the Eastern Front. From 1943 onwards, they were the only squadron fighting on the Eastern Front with Focke-Wulf 90s, the fighter variant. There were a lot of ground attack variants, but the only squadron with Focke-Wulf 90 fighters was the GJ54. Also, when I was in SSI, I was part of the virtual squadron GA54, so that's that. There's that. And also because it was the home of probably the biggest and most successful ace of Focke-Wulf in the whole war, which was Walter Novotny. So yeah, probably would be that. Probably would be the Grunhers, the Green Hearts. Also, they were among the first ones to receive the Focke-Wulf 99, which is probably my favorite submodel of the Focke-Wulf 90. So you have the squadron with my favorite models of my favorite planes of all time. So it's very hard to compete with that. Yeah, probably would be that. A close second would be JJ2 Richthofen, which was based on the channel and was part of most of the very, very, very wild fights over the English Channel between 1941 and 1943. But yeah, I will go for the Green Hearts and the Green Hairs. Sorry for the Germans for my horrible way of, um, well, my horrible German accent. I don't have any. So yeah, there's that. Next question. How do you can find custom battles? Well, I don't really remember. It's been so long since I last went into War Thunder. It's up in one of the menus. You have the choice to go to custom battles, and once you are in custom battles, you can look for any rooms you like, any game model, any game mode, any host, any map. That's up. You can search for it and you can create your own custom mission. So, yep, that's where you find it. Next question. Hey Ram, I know it's not really a flight sim, at least compared to World War II flight sims, but are you going to try Star Citizen? I don't know, I'm probably not. This is, I know everyone is so hyped up by Star Citizen. I am by Elite Dangerous. And they are both based on space, and they are both about space ships, but they are of a very different approach. Star Citizen is, well, is actually the direct evolution of the old Wing Commander series from Chris Roberts. And while I can see why a lot of people liked Wing Commander series and Freelancer and all those games which share the same universe, I have to say I never got really into it. Maybe it was that back in the day I was already developing a liking for realistic mechanics, and Chris Roberts games have none. I mean, it's like arcade on the space. It was a very compelling set of games, I guess. Some of them with sandbox mode, you could be basically whatever you could be, or you wanted to be. There were a lot of spaceships, there were a lot of weapons, there were a lot of missions. It should have been fun, but for me, it wasn't. And probably the reason why it wasn't is because I have already tasted what's a realistic space flight simulator, and that was with Frontier and Frontier First Encounters, which were the development of the original Elite by David Braben, and which incorporated Newtonian physics. So you could do, I mean, space flight is a space flight. There's nothing stopping you. There's no drag. So in order to stop you moving, you have to apply an equal force against that moving. Um, it was, I don't know, it's Newtonian physics was something I really fell in love with. And honestly, Wing Commander series never had that, nor anything similar. They were like X-Wing, but without the Empire and the Rebel Alliance and the Star Wars universe. And I am a huge Star Wars fan. So while X-Wing and T-Fighters were really, really, really fun for me, Wing Commander never hooked me up. And nowadays it's mostly the same. I know Elite is not going to be realistic in the same way Frontier was. I don't know exactly how it's going to work, but it's not going to be Newtonian physics or pure Newtonian physics. There's going to be a little bit of explanation why it's not that way, because it's going to be like an underlying very, very realistic universe, but because of technology, you are allowed to maneuver your spaceships in ways that seem counterintuitive. However, the underlying thing is still there. The underlying realism. Also, there's a different approach. I think that both games are really compatible with each other. I don't think they are going to fight each other because, from the design standpoint, they are very different. Elite Dangerous is procedurally generated. It's oriented towards servers, not as an MMO, and Star Citizen is handcrafted. So every location you go is going to be designed, made, constructed, built by a human. And every mission you do is going to be scripted by a human as well. And while that is great because it allows you to have a lot of detail, graphical perfection, and storylines with a lot of depth into them, the problem is that they have to be man-made and of course take a lot of time and a lot of resources and a lot of dedication to get those things done. Elite Dangerous, on the other hand, is procedurally generated. There's a random generator of numbers, and those numbers decide exactly how your universe is going to be, where the stars are going to be, which um, system, I mean, what's in its solar system, which planets, is there a dual star, a single star, is going to be gas giants, is going to be several planets, yes, one. Those planets can get life, cannot get life. The missions are going to be also procedurally generated for the most part. There are going to be some scripted ones, but for the most part, it's going to be like that. And also, Star Citizen is going to be single player mode, the campaign, and then it's going to be massive multiplayer, like everyone going into the same server. And after a long while, I've come to the decision that I think that a server based game is much more desirable. Of course, Elite is going to be to have public servers where everyone can join, but you can run your own server, and that's amazing because that means that you can get people in, just the people you want. So no douchebags, no idiots, no abusers, no retards, no backstabbers, not that kind of stuff. So yeah, they are very different, and I don't think they are going to compete with each other. Actually, David Braben has pledged to Star Citizen, and Chris Roberts has pledged for Elite Dangerous, because they all see the other game as a complement, not as a competitor. And I'm going to play Elite Dangerous. Star Citizen, I don't know, probably not. Probably not, because of course I will have to purchase it. I'm not really in the best economic situation right now to spend all the money I would want to into games. So no, but I don't think I'm going to try Star Citizen. For starters, because it's based on a universe that never got me hooked on, which is the Wing Commander series, and also because Elite Dangerous is going to take so much time for me, and for the space part of my gaming, I think that is going to be enough. But I mean, all I have seen about that game is amazing. I'm not saying it's not going to be great. It's simply not my cup of tea. It's not from my past experiences. I didn't have a lot of. I have fun playing Wing Commander series and Freelancer, but it was not the huge fun I had in Frontier, for instance. I could say that for Frontier, I was still playing in 2005 in MS-DOS emulator. Go figure. The thousands of hours I have spent on that game. Freelancer for me was a thing of 2 months. I played it. I say, well, yeah, it's cool. It's kind of entertaining, but yeah, whatever. Um, of course, there are a lot of people who think just the opposite, who think that Frontier was not that great, and that Elite is not that great, and that Freelancer and Wing Commander was it. And for them, it's like the most hyped game ever, and for a good reason, because really graphically it's stunning, and I'm guessing it's going to be an awesome game. It's just that for me, I think Elite Dangerous is going to be a better fit, nothing else. Next question. Hey Ram, will we see a video of the previous subscriber battle as of time? Yes, and actually what I'm going to do is kind of a collection. When I do the next subscriber event, what I'm going to do is to get all the footage from the previous one. I actually used for some in one of my previous Young with Rams, but I'm going to get all the footage and do a special video about, well, me going back to War Thunder and flying again, and the one-on-one fights where I got beaten by Hansel Capone, by the way. And yes, there's going to be that. I haven't done it yet. I had it planned for last week, but again, life didn't allow me to. So instead of doing one of an event held 2 weeks ago, what I'm going to do is to do a kind of a special after the next event, and put all the footage together and do maybe 1 or 2 videos about them, mixing both sessions and mixing the action there and the best moments from both of them. Next question. Why do you love the Focke-Wulf 190s? Well, this I already explained in one of my previous Young with Rams. Simply got my attention, simply got my eye, simply got my heart. When I was a young kid, when I was 9, I got a book about World War II planes, and in the fourth page there was the Focke-Wulf 190, and it simply got me. I mean, the looks of that plane, it's not stylish, it's not elegant in the way that a Spitfire of a Mustang can be. However, it's so mean. It looks business. It looks like a killing machine. It looks like a fighter. You look at a Spitfire and you are looking at something like so graceful. It's kind of delicate, even while it may be not. Same with the Mustang. the Focke-Wulf just lacks mean. Just looks like it's going to beat you and destroy you and then smash you after destroying you. It was the looks. It was the looks. Afterwards, I started learning a little bit about planes, about how they flew, and I'm a Bumansumer. I mean, my favorite fighting style is Bumansum, and the Focke-Wulf 190 was one of the first top-class Bumansumers in air combat of World War II, if not the first. So it has the looks, it's the combat style that I love. It's it's got excellent qualities. It's a pilot's plane as well. In the engine combat management videos, when I explain how the pilots manage their controls, you are going to see why the Focke 190 was so superior in that regard. Um, I don't know. It's a plane that just got my imagination, just got my heart, and since then I have been a huge fan of. And the more I look into it, and the more I find things, I'm learning new things about the Focke 190 as days go by. Even today, I'm learning new things as new documentation is being released. The more I learn about it, the more I admire the sheer genius of Kurt Tank, the man who designed it and the team behind him, because of course it was not just a one-man effort. There was a very competent team involved, and the genius, the practicality, the how they did such a practical war tool, and at the same time doing it top class in performance, maneuverability, ability, fighting styles, and fighting capacity. Uh, it's just a it was just an excellent plane. I don't know. But the reason why I got into it was the looks. Maybe if that book, when I opened it, had it had the picture of a P-47, now it would be a P-47. Even while the P-47 is one of my favorite planes ever, by the way. But it's the Focke 190. It's the Focke 190, and just because of that. Next question. Hey Ram, maybe you're gonna comment into this question in a future fighter combat school video, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. So, in a scenario when you are flying a World War II plane and that hasn't got a fire extinguisher and got hit in the engine and set it on fire, how can you put it out? Um, well, put it in account. If you stop the engine from running, you would not have the chance to restart it again. Well, putting it out would not solve the issue. Actually, an engine can't get on fire. Well, certain parts of it can. But if you think about an engine as a whole, it's a metallic structure for the most part. What's burning inside the engine is the fuel. And cooling out the engine won't help. Because if you cool out the engine, you are cooling the fuel supply to the engine. But I mean, in the lines, there is still fuel, which was going into the engine before you cool it off. So the fuel is going to ignite that and find its way to the fuel compartment, and then boom, there you go. If you don't have a fuel, actually I think it's more intuitive to run the fuel than not running it, because if you have pressure on the fuel lines, there's a lesser chance for the fire to go its way back through the circulating fuel back to the fuel engine, to the fuel compartment. So yeah, turning out the engine is not really a good idea. With no fuel fire extinguisher, which was not a wonder, by the way, because in many cases an extinguisher wouldn't be enough to suit up the engine fire, what you would have to do is to try to extinguish it by let's think of a match. If you get a matchbox and you light up a match, you light it off by blowing on it. What happens then in there is that there's so much air pressure that the flame gets away from the fuel supply, which is the match head, and stops. The burning stops. Well, you will have to do a very similar thing in a plane. The standard way was to cut down RPM as much as possible, windmill the propeller if possible, and enter a high speed dive. The higher speed, the better. Because with so much air circulating, there could be the chance that the flame would go away. The base of the flame would be moved away from the fuel source, which is where the fire is engraved on, and the fire will go away on its own. Failing that, there was no way, unless you were in a very very big plane with the ability of an engineer to move towards the engine and try to suffocate the engine with the engine fire with his own hands and maybe a manual extinguisher or something like that. But an engine on fire was a huge, huge, huge problem, and really was really hard to go away and to cut off. So yeah, the standard answer for that question is cut the RPM as much as you can, windmill the propeller if you have the ability to. Not all planes have, and particularly so fighters rarely have the ability to windmill the engine. And feather the engine, sorry, not windmill. Oh, shit. Feathering the engine basically means rotating the propeller so the blades came perpendicular to the airflow, so the propeller wouldn't act as a turbine. So yeah, feathering the propeller, cutting RPM, and diving as much as you could, and hope for the speed to just take the fire away. That's also you could hope for the engine to go out on its own, but that was not really a good idea. Anyway, that's the answer to the question at least. Next question. This one is funny. Can you make videos with cam so people can see you? Because your accent is like an Indian guy. And like someone all like 50 plus voice. No hate. No hate taken here, don't worry. I'm very, very much aware of my accent and how horrible it is. But there's little I can do about it. About the face cam in the videos, no. I'm not going to do that as a regular thing. Only for very special occasions, as in the 10K subscriber video and some very special vlogs, I guess, if something really important happens. But as a general rule, I won't be using facecam. No. If someone wants to think I'm Indian, well, okay, there's nothing wrong with that. If someone thinks I'm 50 years old or older, well, who cares? I mean, I'm who I am. I'm Spanish, not Indian. So yeah, well, what I'm going to do? Facecam is only for special moments. Sorry, so no. Next question. Ram, what do you think about the late Griffon series Spitfire? Do you think they became a new kind of fighter, that maybe they lost the essence of the early speeds? Honestly, I think that when it comes down to air combat, and I know I'm going to get some flack about this, but bear with me. The Spitfire since 1941 was obsolete or obsolescent, in the same way that the BF-109 was, by the way. There were lightweight fighters in a world where air combat was dominated by heavy boom and summers. The Spitfire totally lost its supremacy against the Focke-Wulf 90. Never recovered it, simply for the reason that the contemporary Focke-Wulf 90 to the Spitfire was always superior or equal, but with a twist. Let's put it this way. For instance, Eric Brown says that the Spitfire 9 and the Focke-Wulf 90 A5 were very evenly matched. That if the Focke-Wulf 90 stood in the vertical and in high speed slashing attacks, never entering a turning contest with the Spitfire, it would never be beaten. Conversely, if the Spitfire kept all his flying in the horizontal and turning close and trying to drag the Focke-Wulf 90 into a close turning fight, it wouldn't be beaten. So you have two planes that can't kill each other, if both are flying perfectly and to their strengths. However, what Eric Brown doesn't say is that the Focke-Wulf 90 could basically get out at will, could disengage whenever it wanted, while the Spitfire couldn't, because the Spitfire wasn't as fast as the contemporary Focke-Wulf 90. So the Spitfire F9 wasn't as fast as the Focke-Wulf 90 A5, the Spitfire LF9 without the 150 octane fuel, which was only available in 1945, was contemporary with the Focke-Wulf A6, A7, and A8s, which were all of them faster at medium to low altitudes. And the Griffon Spitfires were contemporary with the Focke-Wulf DD9, which was also faster at most altitudes. So basically, the Focke-Wulf could disengage at will. And if you are in a fighter that you are not going to get shot down as long as you fire it to its strengths, and you can disengage at will, you are inherently in a superior position to a plane where you are not going to be shot down as long as you stay within the parameters you need to be, but you can't disengage at will, because if you try, they are going to catch you and kill you. And the Griffon Spitfire didn't solve that. The Spitfire was simply too light to compete with Focke-Wulf P-51s, P-47s, even P-38s. The nature of air fighting was moving from the idea of very fast climber, decently maneuverable in close turning contests from early war to hit and run, boom and zoom style of late war. There's a reason why at the beginning of World War II there were still a lot of biplanes in flight. The Italians had the CR-42, the British had the Gloster Gladiator, the Germans even had some Henkel 51s in some attack squadrons and Hensel 123s. And at the end of the war, we had the Mi-262, we had the P-80A, we had the Gloster Meteor, all of them planes which were good only for one thing, slashing high-speed attacks. And after the wars, the trend continued. You go to Korea, you have the Mi-15, the F-86, planes that couldn't compete in a closed fight with a propeller engine plane, for instance, but it would destroy it just by boom and zooming it. And after Korea, you will have even more evolutionary gaps towards speed, hit, and run tactics. The Starfighter in the American side, the MiG-21 in the Soviet side. So, since the very early beginning of the World War II up to the start of Vietnam War, all the development of the planes were in just one direction: make it as fast as possible and as good in boom and zoom as possible, and totally disregard turning abilities. I mean, look at the Starfighter. That thing couldn't turn for a crap. It had no wings. It was a rocket. It was basically a missile with wings. So the problem was that the Spitfire was caught just when this changeover of tendencies came very evident. The Spitfire was in its prime in 1940 and early 1941. Afterwards, it simply couldn't compete because there were better planes. And the Griffon engine didn't change that. The Griffon engine gave it a higher top speed, which was desirable. It gave it a higher acceleration and climb rate, which never is bad, but it didn't improve its boom and zoom abilities. The plane was heavier than the early Spitfire marks, lost some of the maneuverability, and maybe lost some of the essence of the early Spitfire, yes. But it never was a competitor in boom and zoom with the German Focke-Wulf, the American P-51, for instance. It was simply the same way as the Bf-109 was. The Bf-109 was in its prime in 1941, 1942. Afterwards, it simply was left behind, because even while the planes were still competitive, and while more modern engines with more power were added, and the latest Bf-109, the Bf-109K, was a rocket with wings. It could climb like mad. It was really fast, really quick, but couldn't boom and zoom. And the same is about the Spitfire. The Spitfire was no different from the Bf-109K. It was a rocket with wings. It accelerated like a demon. It climbed like a rocket. But at the moment when it had to start boom and zooming, it was not good for that. It could do it, even a zero could boom and zoom, but doesn't mean it was good for that. And the problem with the Spitfire, I think, is that it got such a huge legend and aura in the Battle of Britain, and a totally deserved aura, because it was, if not the best, one of the two best fighters of the world at the moment. but it got such a huge aura and it never get rid of it because it was always a very competitive fighter even until the end of the war. But the same can be said about the Bf-109, and the Bf-109 was obsolete by 1943, the same way the Spitfire was. So I think that in a way, yeah, the Griffon engine changed the essence of the Spitfire, because the Griffon engine Spitfires couldn't turn as well as the earlier marks. But that was true of the Spitfire 9 as well. The Spitfire 9 couldn't turn as a Spitfire 5. And the Spitfire 5 couldn't turn as a Spitfire 2. The trend was towards less and less and less maneuverable planes. The thing is that even with a worse turn ability, compared with the predecessors, the Spitfire 14, for instance, was a really great turning machine compared with the competitors. I mean, it could outturn a Focke-Wulf 580 without a problem and a Bf-109 without a problem. So it was a worse turner, but still was better turner than the opposition, but still was not good at Bowman-Sumer. And that's what, by the end of the war, was the trademark of a plane. A fighter was a great fighter if he was good at high-speed attacks. That's why the Tempest was amazing. That's why the Focke-Wulf 590 was amazing. That's why the P-51 was amazing. The P-47 was amazing. And that's why lightweight planes simply lost favor, because they have no room in the new air combat scenario of high-speed encounters and hit-and-run tactics. So yeah, I guess that answers the question. Next question is from the guy who asked me about books. And he says, the kind of book I'm looking for is books that explain the capabilities of airplanes, their evolution, battles, nothing too complicated, but also not too easy. Well, in that case, I would... Still, you don't say if you want something about a single air force. Anyway, I would check out William Green books. And they are kind of encyclopedias of planes of different air forces. For instance, the German fighters and bombers, German fighter combat planes of World War II, American planes of World War II, British planes of World War II. I think that he had also one of Japanese, but that one I don't own. But it's not complicated. It's pretty accurate for the most part. And it does a very good job of describing how planes were developed and the reasons why they were developed that way, how they were in their fighting abilities, if they were good Bowman-Sumers, turners, which were the weak points, the strong points. Yeah, that's a good one. It's not too technical, it's not too complicated, but still is quite good in the amount of information it brings to you. So William Green's books are really good for that. Next question. Hey Ram, have you ever played Combat Flight Simulator? I've been playing the CFS Free Firepower Pack, and its arcade simulator way is funny sometimes. Yes, I actually tried Combat Flight Simulator 1 and 2, but the problem is, as you say, the arcade is not your of it. The Flight Simulator series of Microprose were really good for the civilian part, because they did a really good job of portraying how navigation is, how visual flying, how instrumental flying are. They do a really good job of delivering that experience. So you would learn to read a map. You would learn how to navigate between different radio navigation outposts, what's a radial, how to tune the instruments to the proper frequency. You will learn a lot about also radio, because you will have to turn to different frequencies, and you will learn a lot about how the boards work, how to do a proper approach, how to do a proper the proper mechanics of civil aviation. However, they have crap flight models. I mean, once in the air, the things you could do with a jumbo jet a real jumbo jet tries that and it's going to lose a wing. And of course, if it doesn't fall off the sky first, of course, it was too permissive. You could do things with planes that you shouldn't be able to. So while it did a very good job of displaying civil aviation, it didn't do a good job of displaying actual flying mechanics. And for the most part, it had not any importance at all. I mean, you are not supposed to start doing, I don't know, slicebacks with a 737 or try to do a tail slide with a Concorde. You wouldn't do that in a real plane. So as long as you kept yourself within the historic, the realistic parameters of the simulation, it was a really, really, really good simulation. However, Combat Flight Simulator is about air maneuvering. It's about air combat, and in air combat you have to maneuver. And the problem is that the flight models were not any better in combat flight simulators than in the standard flight simulator series. And you ended up with, I mean, I'm not going to say they were bad. They did a good job in letting a lot of people who have never tried a combat flight simulator before into this world. And I guess it had a really good incentive for people who were used to flight simulators to try it out and to see how it worked, and maybe to get into a new genre, which is not civil aviation but combat aviation. However, for a dedicated hardcore sim lover as me, no. they simply were way too permissive from the flight model point of view, which, well, I guess is okay. I mean, the games actually were advertised as highly realistic combat simulators, but everyone knew they were not. And actually, Microprose never insisted in them being really, really realistic, so it's kind of cool. It was fun. It was fun, but really, if you are into something serious, they are so. It's like taking something that you know can be really good, but doesn't have any salt. For instance, it tastes like nothing. Um, so yeah, it's more or less like that. It was so lacking in taste for me because of the flight models, of course. But say that, I'm not going to say that they were bad. The thing is that they were what they were. I mean, they were like, it's a very good set of games for the guy who's starting to get himself used to a joystick and rudder pedals, for instance. But for someone who has been flying SSI for years, for instance, that he was not good. He was not good. Also, there's another question. And Wings of Prey worth something? Well, Wings of Prey is War Thunder. Or better said, War Thunder is Wings of Prey. It's the evolution of Wings of Prey to a MMO scenario. So no, I don't think it's really worth it at this stage. If you want to fly something like Wings of Prey, fly War Thunder. So yeah. And finally, last comment, more than question, comes from the same guy who asked me about the German weapons in the last video. And it's more or less it's something most of you probably know already, but it's one of those fun stories that not many people know. The comment is, the Allies also have some pretty weird and interesting ideas. I'm just saying, Pykrete airplane carriers. Well, if you don't know what it is, Pykrete aircraft carriers, actually it was an ice ship. And I'm not kidding, it was made of ice. By the middle of the war, like 1942 more or less, the Allies were desperate because the German submarine offensive was winning steam, was really winning the war for the Germans in the sea. And the idea they had was a good one to combat submarines, and in the end was the idea that won the Battle of the Atlantic for the Allies, which was deploying as many aircraft carriers they could into the sea lanes so the aircraft could patrol and detect submarines before they were into the attacking range of the convoys. And that's why the escort carriers started happening, which were nothing but merchant hulls converted into very simple, very rude and crude aircraft carriers, but they got the job done. They provided for a base for maybe 5-6 planes for each convoy to patrol the areas and to scout the zones where the ground-based aircraft couldn't provide for air cover. But back then there was not a huge trust, and I mean, no one could really hope for the massive scale construction numbers of escort carriers that happened afterwards. And also there was a real concern about strategic materials, steel, basically steel, and shipbuilding abilities, because the Germans were destroying more ships than the Allies could produce. So if you had to divert part of that shipbuilding production from merchant hulls into aircraft carriers, maybe there would be a bottleneck and the Germans would win the war. So the idea was to turn to unusual building materials, and someone had the idea to basically build a ship made of ice. And you're going to say, who the hell did think of that idea? Because the ice is going to melt. And the carrier is going to be no more in 2 weeks, like I don't know, an iceberg. How are you going to patrol a Caribbean zone with an aircraft carrier made of ice? Well, actually, this was linked to a discovery, which was Pike, which was by a guy whose surname was Pike, I think, and that was why it was called Pike. It just involved using how is said, wooden dust, sawdust. I don't know how it is said in English. It's the wooden dust that is produced when you pulverize wood and mix it with water and then freezing it. And the idea would be that the ice then created would be so hard and also would have a much higher melting point than the normal ice, that it was made for a decent construction material. And when the idea was presented in front, this actually reached the highest command of the Allied forces. I mean, this was spoken in a convention where there were very high ranked officers of the Allied side, Lord Mountbatten, Admiral King, in the Quebec Conference of 1943. And the idea was presented in front of them. Of course, they were like, "Are you fucking nuts? An aircraft carrier made of ice? Are you stupid?" And the legend goes, I don't know exactly up to which point this is true or is a made-up story, but it said that at one point of the conference and in front of everyone, well, a sample of pykrete was brought, like an ice block made of that material with sawdust and mixed with the water to make the block of ice. And when everyone was told that that particular piece of ice was so resistant that it would even ricochet a bullet, someone said that that was bullshit, took out his own handgun and shot it in front of everyone. And legend goes that the bullet ricocheted off the ice, it just made a little dent, and the ricochet hit Admiral King in the leg. That's the legend. Probably it wasn't like that. That's what things said. Anyway, there was a show of the abilities of the pykrete. Another legend says that a Marine infantry general nameless, I didn't find the name of the legend, got an axe. I don't know what an axe was doing in a conference room, but whatever. And saying that that was nonsense, he discharged the axe over the Pykrete and he dislocated his shoulders without breaking the ice. In any case, it was more than shown and more than proved that the Pykrete was extremely resilient to any kind of physical damage. And while it eventually melted, it was thought that with a proper cooling, it could be kept more or less intact for most of the time. So after the conference, everyone was more or less enthusiastic about the idea, and actually there's something started called Project Habakkuk, which involved building a massive, almost 4 million ton displacement ice carrier. And there were prototypes for that in the Great Lakes. Actually, there were, I think, one or two prototypes of that, which actually demonstrated that it was feasible and that it would work and that it actually was practical to do it. But however, by this stage, the war was being won, the Battle of the Atlantic had been already won, the submarines had been retired by Donitz, and there was no need for something like that. And the incredible expense that would involve creating such a huge monster of Pykrete and then providing with a refrigerator and cooling to keep it in its state also would mean a lot of problems for the people crewing it. Just imagine it, living inside an ice block wouldn't be anything different than that. And also feeding the propulsion to move such a behemoth through the seas, so it was discarded. But it was it was closer to be a reality than a lot of people give credit for. The idea was not just that someone thought it could happen. There were already plans laid up to make it happen. So it didn't just come into life because the Allies were winning the war. Maybe if they were losing the war, we would have seen a massive ice aircraft carrier roaming off the seas. Who knows? But yeah, the Allies also had some very funny ideas back in the day. Anyway, that's it for this Young with Ram. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had fun. And as always, don't forget to put up your questions in the comment section below and to upvote those questions you want to see answered the most. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you later.